The headlights behind me hadn't moved for the last 3 deliveries. At first, I thought it was just another car heading in the same direction. But as the sky darkened and my shift dragged on, that nagging feeling in my gut told me something wasn't right. I adjusted my rearview mirror for the 100th time that night, squinting to make out the driver's face. No luck. The glare from their high beams made it impossible to see anything beyond a vague silhouette. "You're being paranoid, Alex," I muttered to myself, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "It's probably just someone who doesn't know where they're going." But as I turned onto Maple Street for my next delivery, the car followed. I watched it slow down and park about half a block behind me as I pulled up to the house. My hands shook slightly as I grabbed the pizza bag from the passenger seat. The porch light flickered on as I approached, and for a moment I felt a wave of relief. Just another normal delivery, nothing to worry about. I rang the doorbell, plastering on my best customer service smile. A middle-aged woman answered, looking harried. "Oh, thank goodness," she said, fishing some crumpled bills from her pocket. "The kids are starving." I handed over the pizzas, making small talk about the unseasonably cold weather, but my mind was elsewhere, hyper-aware of the car still idling down the street. As soon as the door closed, I jogged back to my car, pizza bag clutched to my chest like a shield. I slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors in one fluid motion. My phone buzzed. Another order. I groaned, fingers hovering over the accept button. Part of me wanted to call it a night, to drive straight home and forget about the creepy car. But I needed the money. Rent was due next week, and I was already cutting it close. I hit accept, then froze. The delivery address was for a house I'd just passed, less than a block from where I sat. My breath caught in my throat as I glanced in the rearview mirror again. The car that had been following me was gone. "Okay," I whispered, trying to steady my nerves. "Okay, you're fine. It's just a coincidence." I put the car in drive and crept forward, scanning the street. No sign of my mysterious tail. Maybe they'd turned off somewhere and I hadn't noticed. Maybe I really had been imagining things. The house I was looking for was set back from the road, partially hidden by overgrown hedges. As I pulled into the driveway, my headlights illuminated a "for sale" sign staked into the patchy lawn. I double-checked the address on my phone. This was definitely the right place, but something felt off. The windows were dark, and there wasn't a car in sight. I sat there for a long moment, engine idling. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to mark the order as undeliverable and get the hell out of there. But I couldn't afford another customer complaint. My rating was already teetering on the edge after that disastrous night last week when my car broke down mid-shift. 2 minutes, I told myself. Give them 2 minutes to answer, then you're out of here. I killed the engine and stepped out of the car, pizza bag in hand. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of dead leaves under my feet as I made my way to the front door. I rang the bell and waited, shifting my weight from foot to foot. No answer. I rang again, then knocked for good measure. "Hello?" I called out. "Pizza delivery." Nothing. I was about to give up when I heard it, a muffled thump from inside the house, followed by what sounded like footsteps. My heart rate kicked up a notch. "Hello? Is someone there? I've got your pizza order." More footsteps, closer this time. A shadow passed by one of the front windows. I took an involuntary step back. "Look, if this is some kind of prank, it's not funny. I'm just trying to do my job." The porch light suddenly blazed to life, momentarily blinding me. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the spots from my vision. And then I saw it. A face pressed against the window beside the door. Pale, wide-eyed, mouth open in a silent scream. I stumbled backward, pizza bag slipping from my grasp. As it hit the porch with a dull thud, the face vanished. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I turned and ran, fumbling for my car keys as I sprinted down the driveway. That's when I saw it. The car that had been following me all night, now parked directly behind mine, blocking me in. "No, no, no!" I gasped, skidding to a halt. The driver's side door of the mysterious car swung open. A tall figure emerged, face hidden in shadow. I spun around, ready to make a break for it on foot, but the front door of the house was opening now too. I was trapped. "What do you want?" I yelled, voice cracking with fear. "I don't have any money, just take my car, okay? Please." The figure from the car took a step forward, hands raised in what looked like a placating gesture. "Alex Schmidt!" a deep voice called out. I froze. They knew my name. Yes, I managed to stammer. The figure moved closer, finally stepping into the light from the house. It was a man, probably in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He was wearing a dark suit that screamed, "Government agent." "I'm Detective Mark Ramirez," he said, pulling out a badge. "We've been trying to catch up with you all night." My mind reeled. A cop? What the hell was going on? "I don't understand," I said. "Why were you following me? What's happening?" Detective Ramirez's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry for frightening you. We couldn't risk approaching you directly until we were sure you weren't involved." "Involved in what?" I asked, still tense and ready to bolt at any moment. The detective gestured towards the house. "There's been a series of assaults in the area, all delivery drivers. We had reason to believe the perpetrator was using the app to lure victims." My blood ran cold as the implications sank in. "So, this order was bait," Ramirez confirmed. "But not for you, for the person we believed was targeting drivers." As if on cue, there was a commotion from the house. 2 more plainclothes officers emerged, restraining a man between them. Even in the dim light, I could see the wild, desperate look in his eyes as they led him to a waiting police car I hadn't noticed before. "Oh my God," I whispered, legs suddenly feeling like jelly. That was him? The one who attacked the other drivers? Ramirez nodded gravely. "We believe so. When he saw our surveillance team, instead of a vulnerable driver, he tried to run, but we had the place surrounded." I sank to the ground, the adrenaline crash hitting me hard. I almost walked right into his trap. "You did everything right," Ramirez said, crouching down beside me. "You trusted your instincts when something felt off. That awareness probably saved your life tonight." I looked up at him, 1,000 questions swirling in my mind. "How did you know he'd order tonight? And why me?" The detective helped me to my feet. "We've been monitoring the app, looking for patterns in his orders. When we saw this one come through to you, we had to act fast. We couldn't warn you without risking tipping him off." I nodded slowly, the pieces starting to fit together. "So you followed me, making sure I was safe until he made his move." "Exactly," Ramirez confirmed. "I know it must have been terrifying, and I'm truly sorry for that. But your cooperation helped us catch a dangerous predator tonight." As the reality of what had almost happened sank in, I felt a mix of relief and lingering fear wash over me. I watched as they loaded the suspect into the police car, his eyes meeting mine for a brief, chilling moment before they shut the door. "What happens now?" I asked, wrapping my arms around myself. Ramirez placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Now, we'll need you to come down to the station to give a statement. After that, I'd strongly recommend taking a few days off. The department can provide counseling services if you need them." I nodded numbly, already dreading having to explain this to my boss. But as I watched the police cars drive away, their red and blue lights painting the quiet street, I knew one thing for certain. I'd never look at a late-night delivery the same way again. As I followed Detective Ramirez to his car, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Another order notification. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and deleted the app. Some jobs just weren't worth the risk. The clock on my dashboard flipped to 11:59 p.m. Right on cue, my phone pinged with a new order. Same address, same meal, same customer, like clockwork, every single night. I'd been delivering to this house for weeks now, always at the stroke of midnight. At first, I thought it was just some night owl with a very specific routine, but something about it never sat right with me. Maybe it was the way the porch light flickered erratically, or how the curtains always seemed to twitch just as I turned to leave. Whatever it was, it left a knot in my stomach that grew tighter with each passing night. As I pulled up to the curb, I noticed something different. The house was dark, completely dark. No porch light, no glow from inside, nothing. In all the times I delivered here, I'd never seen it like this. I sat in my idling car, debating what to do. The rational part of my brain said to mark it as undeliverable and move on, but curiosity, or maybe something else, got the better of me. I grabbed the bag of food and stepped out into the cool night air. The silence was oppressive as I made my way up the cracked concrete path. No crickets chirping, no distant traffic, not even the rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was as if the whole world was holding its breath. I reached the porch, my footsteps creaking on the old wood. My hand hovered over the doorbell, hesitating. This close, I could see that the door was slightly ajar. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. "Food delivery. No response. I was about to turn and leave when I heard it. A muffled sound from inside the house. It could have been the settling of an old building or the wind playing tricks. But to my ears, it sounded horribly like a cry for help. My heart began to race. I should leave, I told myself. Call the police, let them handle it. This wasn't my problem. But what if someone was hurt? What if they needed help right now? Before I could talk myself out of it, I pushed the door open wider. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. "Is everything okay in there?" The interior of the house was pitch black. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a cluttered entryway. Stacks of newspapers and magazines lined the walls, yellowed with age. The air was stale, thick with the musty smell of neglect. I took a tentative step inside, my better judgment screaming at me to turn back. "I'm coming in," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. I heard a noise. "Is anyone here?" As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I noticed something odd. Despite the layers of dust coating every surface, there was a clear path through the debris. Recent footprints disturbed the dust on the floor, leading deeper into the house. I followed the trail, my flashlight beam bouncing off peeling wallpaper and faded family photos. The house seemed to go on forever, a maze of narrow hallways and closed doors. With each step, the feeling of wrongness intensified. I reached what looked like a living room. Sheets draped over furniture created eerie, misshapen silhouettes in the darkness. And there, in the center of the room, was a table. On it sat dozens of takeout containers, identical to the one I carried. Some looked fresh. Others were clearly days or even weeks old, food rotting inside. My breath caught in my throat. What the hell was going on here? That's when I heard it again, a muffled cry, closer this time. It was coming from behind a door at the far end of the room. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. "I'm here to help. Are you hurt?" I approached the door slowly, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My hand reached for the doorknob, trembling. Just as my fingers brushed the cool metal, a board creaked behind me. I whirled around, nearly dropping my phone in shock. There, emerging from the shadows, was a figure, tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. As it stepped into the beam of my flashlight, I saw its face, gaunt, eyes sunken deep into their sockets, skin pale as death. "You're early," it said in a voice like dry leaves scraping against pavement. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the door. "What?" The figure tilted its head, studying me with those hollow eyes. "The food! You're early! It's not midnight yet!" My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This thing, whatever it was, couldn't be human, and yet it was speaking to me as if this was a normal transaction. I heard a noise," I managed to stammer. "I thought someone might need help." The creature's lips curled into what might have been a smile, revealing teeth that were just a little too sharp. "Oh, someone always needs help here, but not the kind you can give." My hand fumbled for the doorknob behind me. I had to get out of here now. But as I turned it, I realized with dawning horror that it was locked. The thing took a step closer, its movements unnaturally fluid. "You're not the usual one," it mused. "No matter, you'll do just fine." I pressed myself against the door, searching desperately for an escape route. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I'll just leave the food and go, okay?" It chuckled, a sound like bones rattling. "Oh, but you can't leave now. You've seen too much. And besides..." It gestured to the table of rotting takeout containers. "I'm still hungry." Panic surged through me. I dropped the food bag and bolted, ducking under the creature's outstretched arm. I raced back the way I came, knocking over stacks of newspapers as I went. Behind me, I could hear it moving, unnaturally fast. I burst out of the front door, gasping for air. My car was just a few yards away. If I could just reach it. Something grabbed my ankle, sending me sprawling onto the overgrown lawn. I rolled over to see the creature looming above me, its long fingers wrapped around my leg. "No one ever stays for dinner," it said, almost sadly. "Why won't you stay for dinner?" In that moment, survival instinct took over. I kicked out hard, my foot connecting with its skeletal face. It reeled back, momentarily stunned, and I scrambled to my feet. I ran like I'd never run before, not daring to look back. I could hear it behind me, moving faster than anything should be able to move. I reached my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. Just as I wrenched the door open, I felt cold fingers brush the back of my neck. With a strangled cry, I dove into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut. The creature's face appeared at my window, those hollow eyes boring into me. Its mouth moved, but I couldn't hear what it was saying over the sound of my own panicked breathing and the engine roaring to life. I floored it, tires screeching as I peeled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, I saw the thing standing in the middle of the road, watching me go. And then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. I drove aimlessly for hours, too terrified to go home. When the sun finally began to rise, I found myself in the parking lot of the police station. With shaking hands, I turned off the engine and sat there, trying to process what had happened. Part of me wanted to run inside and tell them everything, but who would believe me? I barely believed it myself. They'd think I was crazy or on drugs. I'd lose my job, maybe worse. As I sat there, debating what to do, my phone pinged. A new delivery order. My blood ran cold as I saw the address. That same house. The message read, "You forgot your flashlight. Come back anytime. I'll be waiting." I deleted the app right then and there, found a new job the very next day. But even now, months later, I still wake up in a cold sweat, remembering those hollow eyes and that voice like dry leaves. And every night at midnight, no matter where I am, I swear I can hear a faint knocking, as if something is trying to get in. The fog rolled in like a living thing, devouring the road ahead of me. One minute I was cruising down a clear stretch of highway, and the next I was engulfed in a world of white. My headlights seemed to bounce right back at me, creating a disorienting halo effect that made it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet in front of my car. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield, as if that would somehow help me pierce the thick blanket of mist. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was my last delivery of the night, and of course it had to be to some remote farmhouse on the outskirts of town. "Just a little further," I muttered to myself, glancing down at the GPS on my phone. The blue dot representing my car inched along the map at an agonizingly slow pace. According to the app, I still had about 10 minutes to go. I eased my foot off the gas pedal, slowing to a crawl. Better to be late than to end up in a ditch, or worse. The last thing I needed was to total my car. This delivery gig was the only thing keeping me afloat while I looked for a real job, and I couldn't afford to lose it. As I crept along, my eyes straining to make out any landmarks in the fog, a dark shape suddenly materialized in the middle of the road. My heart leapt into my throat as I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. For a terrifying moment, I thought I was going to hit whatever it was, but my old Honda shuddered to a stop just inches away from the mysterious obstacle. I sat there for a second, hands shaking, trying to catch my breath. What the hell was that? A deer? Some idiot standing in the road? Peering through the fog, I could just make out what looked like a person-shaped silhouette. My blood ran cold. Had I almost hit someone? I rolled down my window, leaning out slightly. "Hey, E!" I called into the mist. "Are you okay?" No response. The figure didn't move. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the damp night air. Something wasn't right here. I should just drive around it, I thought. Get to my delivery and forget this ever happened. But what if someone was hurt? What if they needed help? Cursing my own conscience, I put the car in park and grabbed my phone, turning on its flashlight. I stepped out into the fog, which seemed to cling to me like cold, wet fingers. "Hello?" I called again, sweeping my light back and forth. "Is anyone there? Do you need help?" As I got closer to the shape in the road, my light finally cut through the mist enough for me to see what it was. I stopped short, confusion replacing my fear. It wasn't a person at all. It was a jacket, a ratty old denim thing, stretched over what looked like a wooden pole stuck into an old tire, some kind of bizarre scarecrow standing in the middle of the road. "What the hell?" I muttered, reaching out to touch the jacket. It was soaking wet, as if it had been out here for hours. That's when I heard it, a soft tapping sound coming from behind me. I whirled around, my heart racing again. The sound was coming from my car. Through the fog, I could just make out a dark shape next to the driver's side door. As I watched, frozen in place, a hand raised and tapped on the window again. "Hey!" a voice called out, muffled by distance and mist. "You okay in there?" For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind raced through 100 terrifying scenarios. Was this some kind of trap? Had someone set up that fake person in the road to get me to stop? "I saw you swerve," the voice continued. "Wanted to make sure you didn't hit anything." I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. I'm over here," I managed to call out. The figure by my car straightened up, turning towards the sound of my voice. "Oh," they said, sounding surprised. "What are you doing out there?" I gestured helplessly at the jacket scarecrow. I thought it was a person." The figure started walking towards me, slowly materializing out of the fog. As they got closer, I could see it was a man, probably in his mid-50s, wearing a flannel shirt and a worn baseball cap. "Ah, hell," he said as he reached me, eyeing the scarecrow. "I told Billy to take that damn thing down. Kids," he added, shaking his head. I blinked at him, still trying to process what was happening. Your kid put this here." The man nodded, looking embarrassed. "My grandson. He and his friends thought it'd be funny to scare people. I'm real sorry about that. You're not hurt, are you?" The adrenaline was starting to wear off, leaving me feeling shaky and a little foolish. "No, I'm fine. Just startled, I guess." "I don't blame you," the man said. "This fog's bad enough without dummy pranksters in the road. Here, let me get this out of your way." He bent down and picked up the tire, grunting with the effort. As he dragged it to the side of the road, I noticed a house set back from the street, warm light spilling from its windows. How had I not seen that before? "You live here?" I asked, gesturing towards the house. The man nodded. "Yep. Was just letting the dog out when I heard tires squealing. Figured I better check it wasn't another accident. We get a lot of those on nights like this." I shivered, suddenly very aware of how easily this could have ended differently. "Well, thanks for checking," I said. "I should probably get going. I've got a delivery to make." The man's eyebrows rose. "A delivery? Out here? Must be for the Johnsons. They're the only ones further down this road." I pulled out my phone, checking the address. Yeah, that's them." He shook his head. "You'll never make it in this fog. Their place is a good 5 miles down and the road gets real twisty. Tell you what, why don't you come inside and use our phone? You can call them and see if they're willing to come pick it up." I hesitated. Every horror movie I'd ever seen was screaming at me not to go into a stranger's house in the middle of nowhere, but the alternative was driving further into this pea soup fog, possibly off the road entirely. As if reading my thoughts, the man held up his hands. "No pressure. I know it's a strange situation, but my wife's inside and I promise we're not axe murderers or anything." He chuckled, then seemed to realize that might not be the most reassuring thing to say. We're just regular folks. I'm Tom, by the way." I found myself relaxing a bit despite myself. There was something genuinely kind about Tom's weather-worn face. "I'm Jess," I said. "And, yeah, okay. Using your phone would be great, thanks." Tom smiled, looking relieved. "Great, come on in. Marge'll probably try to feed you. Fair warning. She loves having visitors." As we walked towards the house, the fog seemed to part just enough for me to see a well-lit porch with a couple of rocking chairs. It looked cozy and inviting. about as far from a horror movie setting as you could get. Inside, the house was warm and smelled like cinnamon. Tom's wife, Marge, was exactly as he described, a whirlwind of motherly concern who insisted on making me hot cocoa while I used their landline to call the Johnsons. To my relief, they were understanding about the situation and agreed to come pick up their food. While we waited, Tom regaled me with stories about life in the country, and Marge pressed homemade cookies on me until I felt like I might burst. By the time headlights appeared in the driveway signaling the Johnsons' arrival, I found myself reluctant to leave. The warmth and kindness of these strangers had completely transformed what could have been a terrifying night into something almost magical. As I said my goodbyes and headed back to my car, the fog was finally starting to lift. Tom and Marge stood on their porch, waving as I drove away. I couldn't help but smile, thinking about how differently this night could have gone. Sometimes, it seems, the things that scare us the most are just scarecrows in the fog. And sometimes the real magic happens when we're brave enough to step out of our car and into the unknown. I made it home safely that night, with a full stomach and a heart warmed by unexpected kindness. And every time I drive past that stretch of road now, fog or no fog, I can't help but smile and wave at the little house set back from the street, a beacon of light in what once seemed like endless darkness. The smell hit me first, musty, damp, with an underlying sweetness that made my stomach turn. As I stood on the crumbling front step, pizza bag in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. The house loomed before me, a dilapidated Victorian that had clearly seen better days. Paint peeled from the siding in long, curling strips, and the overgrown yard was a tangle of weeds and debris. It looked like something out of a horror movie, the kind of place teenagers would dare each other to spend the night. But this wasn't a movie. This was my job. Deliver the pizza, collect the money, and get out. Simple. Except nothing about this felt simple. I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. The porch creaked ominously under my feet, and I swear I saw something skitter in the shadows by the boarded-up window. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to get back in my car and drive away. But I needed this job. Rent was due, and my bank account was hovering dangerously close to empty. Taking a deep breath, I rapped my knuckles against the weathered door. The sound echoed unnaturally in the still night air. For a long moment, nothing happened. I was about to knock again when I heard it, shuffling footsteps from inside, slow and uneven. A bolt slid back, then another, and finally the door creaked open. The woman who peered out at me was ancient, her face a maze of wrinkles surrounding watery blue eyes. Wispy white hair stuck out at odd angles from her head, and she clutched a faded housecoat tightly around her frail frame. "Yes," she asked, her voice quavering. "Who are you?" I plastered on my best customer service smile. "Good evening, ma'am. I have a pizza delivery for this address." The old woman's brow furrowed in confusion. "Pizza? I didn't order any pizza." My smile faltered. I'd had mix-ups before, wrong addresses or prank orders, but something about this felt different. "Are you sure? The order was placed about 30 minutes ago for this address." She shook her head slowly. No, you must be mistaken. I haven't ordered anything in..." Her voice trailed off, and for a moment, her eyes seemed to lose focus, gazing at something beyond me. I shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I'm sorry for the confusion. I'll just head back and let the restaurant know." "Wait!" The old woman's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't go, please. I'm so lonely here." Her grip was ice cold, and I had to suppress a shudder. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I really need to get back to work." Her eyes locked onto mine, suddenly sharp and alert. "You don't understand. He'll be angry if I'm alone again. You have to stay." A chill ran down my spine. "Who'll be angry?" But the woman's gaze had already drifted again, her hand falling away from my wrist. "It's so quiet here," she murmured. "So quiet since they took him away." Every instinct told me to run, but something kept me rooted to the spot. Maybe it was pity or morbid curiosity, or just the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. "Ma'am," I said gently, "is everything okay? Do you need help?" She blinked at me as if just remembering I was there. Help? Oh yes, I need help. Won't you come in? I have cookies. I always keep cookies for when he visits. Against my better judgment, I found myself following her into the house. The interior was like stepping back in time-faded floral wallpaper, doilies on every surface, and a pervasive smell of mothballs and decay. The old woman shuffled towards what I assumed was the kitchen, muttering to herself. I trailed behind, pizza bag still clutched in my hands like a shield. "Ma'am," I called out, "I really should be going. Are you sure you're all right here by yourself?" She turned to me, a plate of ancient-looking cookies in her trembling hands. "By myself? Oh no, dear, I'm never by myself. He's always watching, always." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Who's watching? But she was already shuffling past me, towards a closed door at the end of the hallway. "He'll want to meet you. He gets so jealous when I have visitors." Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to leave, to get out while I still could, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this confused old woman needed help. What if she was in danger? What if there really was someone else in the house? I followed her to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. "Ma'am, maybe we should call someone. A family member, or—" She reached for the doorknob, her hand shaking. "He's waiting. He's always waiting." As her fingers closed around the knob, a sound cut through the musty silence, the sharp crack of breaking glass, followed by a woman's scream. I whirled around, nearly dropping the pizza bag. The scream had come from upstairs. "What was that?" I gasped. "Is there someone else here?" But when I turned back to the old woman, she was gone. The door she'd been about to open stood ajar, revealing nothing but an empty, dusty room beyond. Another scream pierced the air, closer this time. It was followed by a heavy thud, like something large falling to the floor. My heart raced as I backed away from the empty room. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Is anyone there? Do you need help?" Silence, then footsteps coming down the stairs. Slow, deliberate. I turned to run, but my foot caught on a loose floorboard. I stumbled, the pizza bag flying from my hands and spilling its contents across the grimy floor. As I scrambled to my feet, I saw a shadow fall across the hallway. Someone was at the top of the stairs. "I'm sorry," I babbled, inching towards the front door. "I shouldn't be here. There was a mistake with the delivery, and—" The figure began to descend. In the dim light, I could make out the shape of a man, tall and broad-shouldered. But something about his movements was wrong, jerky, unnatural. I reached the front door and yanked on the handle. It didn't budge. No, I muttered, pulling harder. The door remained stubbornly shut, as if it had been sealed. The footsteps were closer now. I could hear ragged breathing, and underneath it a sound like buzzing. I spun around, pressing my back against the door. The figure had reached the bottom of the stairs. In the gloom, I could just make out his face, or what should have been his face. Where features should have been, there was only a writhing mass of insects. Beetles, flies, and things I couldn't even name poured from empty eye sockets and a gaping mouth. I screamed. The sound tore from my throat, primal and terrified. The thing that wasn't a man took a step towards me, arms outstretched. Bugs fell from its sleeves, scuttling across the floor towards my feet. In that moment, survival instinct took over. I threw myself at the nearest window, shoulder first. The old brittle glass shattered under my weight, and I tumbled out onto the overgrown lawn. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the cuts and scrapes from the broken glass. Behind me, I heard the buzz of insects grow louder, angrier. I ran, faster than I'd ever run in my life. I didn't stop until I reached my car, fumbling with shaking hands to unlock the door. As I peeled away from the curb, tires squealing, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The old Victorian stood silent and dark, no sign of movement from within. But as I watched, a figure appeared at the broken window. The old woman, her face expressionless as she raised a hand in a slow, eerie wave. I drove straight to the police station, still covered in dirt and blood from my escape. The officers listened to my story with growing concern, then immediately dispatched units to the house. But when they arrived, they found nothing. No old woman, no insect-faced man, not even any sign of the broken window I'd escaped through. The house was empty, they said, and had been for years. I quit my delivery job the next day, found a new apartment in a different part of town. But even now, months later, I still wake up in a cold sweat, the buzz of phantom insects in my ears. And sometimes, when the night is particularly dark and quiet, I swear I can hear a faint, quavering voice calling out, "Don't go. Please, I'm so lonely here. I always keep my windows locked now, just in case." The city went dark at 9:17 p.m. One moment, the streets were alive with the usual glow of streetlights and neon signs. The next, we were plunged into a darkness so complete it felt like a physical presence. I was halfway through my delivery shift when it happened. One second I was cruising down Main Street, radio blaring, and the next my car sputtered and died, along with every light in sight. For a moment, I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. All around me I could hear the sounds of confusion and panic beginning to build. Car horns blared as vehicles collided in the sudden blackout. Shouts and screams echoed from nearby buildings, and underlying it all was an eerie silence where the constant hum of electricity should have been. I fumbled for my phone, squinting at the sudden brightness of the screen. No service. Of course. "Okay, don't panic," I muttered to myself, trying to ignore the way my heart was racing. "It's just a blackout, probably be fixed in no time." But as the minutes ticked by and the darkness showed no signs of lifting, a knot of unease began to form in my stomach. This wasn't like any blackout I'd experienced before. It felt different, wrong somehow. I had one delivery left on my route, some rich guy in one of those old mansions up on the hill overlooking the city. Under normal circumstances, I would have called it quits and headed home. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was the thought of the generous tip these mansion dwellers usually gave, or maybe it was just the idea of sitting alone in my dark apartment, waiting for the lights to come back on. Whatever the reason, I found myself grabbing my phone to use as a flashlight and setting out on foot. The mansion wasn't too far, and with traffic at a standstill, walking seemed like the best option. As I made my way through the darkened streets, the city felt like a different world. Shadows seemed to move in ways they shouldn't, and every sound was amplified in the unnatural quiet. More than once, I jumped at what turned out to be nothing more than a stray cat or a rustling newspaper. The climb up to the mansion was steep, and I was breathing heavily by the time I reached the wrought iron gates. They stood open, which struck me as odd. These types of places usually had pretty tight security. The driveway wound through immaculately landscaped grounds, though in the dark they took on a sinister quality. Perfectly trimmed hedges became looming monsters, and the gentle splash of a fountain sounded uncomfortably like footsteps following me. Finally, I reached the house itself. It was massive, a sprawling Victorian affair that looked like it had been plucked straight out of a Gothic novel. In the beam of my phone's flashlight, the windows looked like dead eyes staring down at me. I climbed the steps to the front door, my footsteps echoing unnaturally in the quiet. There was no doorbell that I could see, so I raised my hand to knock. That's when I saw it. A face in one of the upper windows, pale and desperate. A hand pressed against the glass, moving in a frantic waving motion. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. The face disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving me to wonder if I'd imagined it. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small and scared in the vast darkness. "Is someone there? Do you need help?" No response, just the oppressive silence of the blackout. I should leave, I thought. Go back to the city, find a police officer, report what I'd seen. But something kept me rooted to the spot. What if someone really was in trouble up there? Before I could talk myself out of it, I tried the front door. To my surprise, it swung open easily. "Hello?" I called again, stepping cautiously into a cavernous foyer. "Food delivery! Is anyone home?" My voice echoed off marble floors and high ceilings. No answer. I swept my phone's flashlight around, revealing glimpses of expensive artwork and antique furniture. Everything looked pristine, undisturbed. No signs of a struggle or anything out of place. But then I heard it. A faint sound coming from upstairs. It could have been the house settling, or the wind, but to my ears it sounded horribly like a muffled cry for help. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around and run. This wasn't my problem. I was just a delivery driver, not a hero. But the thought of someone trapped up there, desperate for help, spurred me forward. I climbed the grand staircase slowly, wincing at every creak of the old wood under my feet. At the top, a long hallway stretched in both directions, lined with closed doors. "Hello?" I tried again, my voice barely above a whisper now. "I'm here to help. Where are you?" Another sound, closer this time. It was definitely a voice, though I couldn't make out any words. I moved down the hallway, testing each door as I went, all locked. The voice seemed to be coming from the end of the hall, where an ornate double door stood slightly ajar. As I approached, I could feel my heart pounding so hard I was sure it must be audible. My palms were sweaty, making it difficult to keep a grip on my phone. I pushed the door open slowly, wincing at the loud creak of hinges that probably hadn't been oiled in years. "Hello?" I called one last time, stepping into what looked like a study or library. The beam of my flashlight swept across shelves laden with old books, a massive desk, and I froze. There, in the center of the room, was a figure. It stood with its back to me, unnaturally still. Are you okay?" I managed to stammer. "I saw someone waving from the window. Do you need help?" Slowly, so slowly it seemed to take an eternity, the figure began to turn. I raised my flashlight, and in that moment, I felt my blood turn to ice. Where a face should have been, there was only a smooth, featureless expanse of skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just nothing. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. My body felt paralyzed with terror as the thing took a step towards me. And then, impossibly, a seam appeared in the blank face. It widened, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth and a darkness deeper than the blackout around us. I ran. I don't remember consciously deciding to move, but suddenly I was flying down the hallway, my feet barely touching the ground. Behind me I could hear something in pursuit, its movements unnaturally fast and fluid. I took the stairs 3 at a time, nearly falling in my haste. The front door loomed before me, my only escape, but as I reached for the handle, I realized with dawning horror that it was locked. I spun around, pressing my back against the door. The thing from upstairs was at the top of the stairs now, its faceless head tilted as if studying me. In the dim light of my dropped phone, I could see more shapes emerging from the shadows. Dozens of them, all with that same blank face and gaping, toothy maw. This was it, I thought. This was how I died, trapped in a dark mansion, devoured by monsters straight out of a nightmare. But then, just as the creatures began to descend the stairs, a miracle happened. With a low hum that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house, the lights flickered back to life. The sudden brightness was blinding after so long in the dark. I blinked rapidly, spots dancing in my vision, and when my eyes finally adjusted, the hallway was empty. No monsters, no faceless horrors, just an ordinary, if overly ornate, entrance hall. I didn't wait to see if the apparitions would return. I yanked the door open, no longer locked, and ran as if the hounds of hell were at my heels. I didn't stop until I reached the bottom of the hill, where bewildered people were emerging from their homes, squinting in the newly restored streetlights. I never delivered to that mansion again. Never even went back to that part of town if I could help it. I told myself it was just a hallucination brought on by stress and the strange circumstances of the blackout. But sometimes, late at night, I still wake up in a cold sweat. The image of that blank face and tooth-filled maw burned into my mind. And every time there's a power flicker, no matter how brief, I find myself glancing nervously at the shadows, wondering what might be lurking just out of sight, waiting for the lights to go out again.